Welcome back to Built to Ship, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with founders and product leaders shipping real AI products into the world. I'm your host, Tyler Postal from Voker, and today I'm joined by Gabe. He's the founder at FlowlineHealth, a platform that's using voice-based AI to handle routine patient outreach and care coordination on behalf of care teams. Gabe's great to have you here.
Nice to be here, Tyler.
Awesome. Of course. Yeah. Well, why don't we start with your background? What were you doing before Flowline, and where did you get the idea for the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So before Flowline, I started my career at Microsoft, then to Google. Google brought me down to San Francisco around 2023, which obviously had like a huge wave of AI. So was partially FOMO, partially just like inspired by the city, and started poking around ideas, and then ultimately met my co-founder on a ski trip in Japan, which was super serendipitous, where we essentially just like hit it off, had a ton of mutual friends, and then quickly bothered them by talking about AI and then different opportunities the whole trip. So some background on him: he scaled out voice agents like right as they got good to bring to production for a YC company. And then that subsequently is sold, and his parents are both surgeons. So we were like, okay, obviously quite a bit of opportunity in the healthcare space, despite us not working in there before, and then kind of blindly charged in, which I think is a common theme for founders, right? Like the kind of hubris.
Definitely.
We can solve this. I think most folks in the healthcare industry, after like working within the large behemoth systems, are like, oh, I would never found a company here. But the blind ignorance kind of helped to
That's
just
awesome.
like dive in. And how
Definitely.
we found the idea really was just like, we look at the themes of like healthcare, kind of where the industry is moving. And there's this interesting contract structure called value-based care, which incentivizes a lot of proactive actions. But healthcare providers aren't necessarily geared to have those muscles. So it's a lot of calling to make sure patients are on medications, enrolling them in services, and just like kind of nitty gritty, just like non-clinical workflows that AI agents can really do a lot of work to help the providers with.
Amazing. I love that you guys charged in, without a deep background there. How have you like built up that knowledge and experience? I assume it's talking to people, but how'd you even get in the door? What was that process like?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting as far as like building a base of competence within healthcare specifically as an industry is all of the policies are documented online, right? So like there's this large corpus of information. Pre-chat GPT would be like basically unusable, but we are able to kind of build like, I would say like 100 or 200 level core competency in like the lingo, the contract structures, et cetera, just by doing independent research. And then when we reached out to healthcare professionals, that language allowed us to have like a little bit more credibility around the problem we were trying to solve. And then we'd get on, chat, learn more, and then kind of research, reach out again, have more conversations, et cetera.
That's great. No, I think that's cool, because it's not even, this is a little bit meta, but you're using AI to figure out where and what to build. And then you're also building AI into your product, I assume. So maybe tell us a bit more about, you gave the high level, but what's an example of a type of customer for Flowline? What do you help them solve? And what's their experience look like when they come to onboard with you?
Yeah, totally. So generally we work with mid-sized to large healthcare providers. So folks that have like responsibility for lives over like a longer period of time or an acute episode, right? So like what it looks like to like onboard with us is like, we understand like, hey, what outcomes are you trying to drive? So one of our big use cases is medication adherence, saying like, hey, if you have diabetes, you need to be on metformin or else you go to the hospital. And the contracts that these providers have incentivize that. So it's like, okay, let's understand your process of how you're doing it today, where the data flows are, where it makes sense to either put an agent in replace of a human or just general automation in replace of a human. And then we kind of work in a semi-forward deployed model. Obviously, we're trying to fit them within our platform and what we think makes sense. but it's a lot of professional service consulting work to say like, okay, map out the ideal process. How do you want to get alerts? What systems should have those alerts, or do you want to live within our platform? And then we go live with the voice agents, which is a lot of prep before that. But
amazing. So is that the main sort of AI powered part of your product? Is it voice agent? Are there any other types of agents like, chatbots or, just background automations doing certain tasks?
yeah, there's a lot of background automations that I would say are more in the lines of like traditional software, right? So one of them that we have is just like eligibility checks, right? Like you might have a human going in and clicking through portals to see if a patient is eligible for a certain service. We have an agent that then creates the automation, but that automation runs as kind of traditional software. And then the actual interaction with with other humans, those are like our main agent components. So like voice agents talking to patients, voice agents talking to pharmacists, stuff like that.
Great. And with those voice agents, what are they doing? Are they collecting information? Do they go take action, or do they mostly just provide information to the user? What are their capabilities?
Yeah, so I would say all, depending on the use case. I'll give you one that's like, I would say one of the more like salient examples for me was like, we were doing a medication check with a patient. And it's usually routine, right? The ideal path is you go like, hey, did you pick up your metformin? Oh, you did. Is everything fine with it? Totally fine, right? That's the easy path. 99% of the calls follow that. But we had one where someone picks up, it's not the patient, it's her mom, because like the patient is 95. She's like, oh, the torvastatin. My mom actually hides that under her pillow because it's too big. She doesn't want to take it. So then our agent's like, oh, okay. Number one, I'm worried listening to like the recording to be like, did it do correct? It did. But the agent's like, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about like what happened here? It's like, oh, we've looked at liquid forms, et cetera. It's like, okay, sounds like there's a problem here. I'll have a healthcare provider call you soon. And then after the call, it went and escalated within the provider's platform so they could go and make sure that that patient was taken care of.
Awesome. So it sounds like, the agents are kind of doing screening for the professionals. So like there's no point in those professionals making all these calls and then someone saying, yep, I'm taking it, it's all good. That's kind of a waste of time. But if there is something that needs to be escalated, the agent has the ability to kind of like log that and pull the human into the loop. Is that about right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And then you mentioned it's like integrated into their the provider's software. Like the agent can go update that. How do you do that? Is that through like tool calls? Is that through some sort of like trigger, or how do you actually have the agent take action in the other system?
Yeah. So in this case, post call, we run like an analysis of like what needs to happen. And then instead of having like the agent call the tool live, we just say like, okay, like this is the outcome. We now need to like escalate a case. The tool that this particular provider uses is Salesforce, but we can do that in like other care management platforms or kind of wherever the providers live. So it's just like a summary and looking at the transcript to understand like, okay, was there anything that needed to happen here?
Nice. I have a couple hypotheses on why you architected it that way, but I'm curious to hear from you, like why not give the tool directly to the voice agent? I think these are the kind of considerations that people are always, you kind of have to play around with and test and figure out what's the right way to do it. So it's helpful for the audience to hear kind of like what you guys went through and why you figured that out as the solution.
Yeah, I think so. One thing is as we rolled out the solution and kind of like a hypercare model, like we wanted to do that escalation manually at first to make sure that like, okay, we're not giving it like a full agentic solution from the get-go. We're making sure that that decision is correct. As well as it's just like, it makes the interaction a little clunky on the phone if it's doing it live. And also these models are pretty tool happy. Like, if you've talked to other voice AI folks, like they call the tools like end call. That's a huge issue. Is like one thing, like when you have a voice call, right? Like you'll find that people on the phone are like, okay, bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye. Agents are like, all right, thanks for calling. And they slam.
That's a good call out there. I didn't even realize that was a challenge, but like these are the kind of things that as humans we might take for granted, that that's how we interact, but not realizing that agents don't have that. I'm sure there's ways you can kind of configure it and maybe even fine tune to improve that interaction, but knowing that that's a challenge is probably something that anyone building a voice agent might run into. How have you actually built your voice agents? Do you use, I've heard people talk about like, oh, we use, speech to speech models. Others will translate speech to text, then use a reasoning model in the middle, like a text-based LLM, and then translate that back to audio. What have you found is the best architecture there, and why did you choose that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We use speech to text with like a reasoning and then text to speech. And then one thing we really like about that is like you can choose kind of like the best in class components for each rather than having like a voice to voice. So like OpenAI, their real-time models, like I do expect that to be the future eventually. But right now they just, for cost and performance, really are not there. As well as like if you want different voices, right, you can just slot in the best 11 lab for the best voice onto an existing architecture. Or like if you want it like a lower cost provider. Whereas with those voice to voice models, like you're kind of just stuck with whatever they have.
Makes sense. So it's a lot more modular. And do you build these things from scratch? Are there any frameworks or voice agent builders that you like to use? What would you recommend to folks?
Yeah, I would say like we went all like down the stack when we started. Like we started on Vappy. We were like, this will be totally fine. And then like as we wanted more control, we eventually just built it off of LiveKit, which is where we're living today. And that just like for the small nuances and tweaks we wanted to find, it's just like the best in class like tool.
Is there anything you could share
there?
there? Like, what are some of those problems you ran into that others might if they don't build it, from the ground up?
Yeah. So one thing is like, so pacing matters, and especially in conversations with like older adults. So like you might need to have something where like the first message is said, like if someone says hello and you have a fast response time, hey, I'm calling from this doctor's office about XYZ. I'm an automated voice agent. This call will take 2 minutes, right? So that like response time might need to be really fast at the beginning, but then as you move through the call, because older individuals talk slower, you need to have the control to be like, all right, after this interaction, your response time is actually going to be much longer, right? To let them finish, think, etc. Which like on a platform like Vappy or like, name any of your agent builders, generally that is abstracted away and it's more of like a blunt, like, here's your response time overall.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's a great nuance to call out. And I think these are the kind of things that, some people will say that, how AI is magic or whatever. And there's a lot that's really impressive what all the new technology can do. But there's always these like, I don't know, around the edges or, this configuration that you need to do for your use case. I'm sure there's other types of, maybe if you're speaking to Gen Z or some other, age person, you might want a quicker pace or a different tone. So those are the kind of nuances you probably only learn by like working directly with your customers and realizing you need to tweak the product. So
yeah,
totally. Great insight there. One thing I like to ask a lot of the guests is about actually monitoring, tracking, improving your agents once they're in production. The past couple of years, everyone's been working on like, how do I get this to production? They have, some vibe checks they do locally. They have maybe even a small test set of information, but then they put it in front of users and it's like, wow, the agent's doing things that I didn't expect, or people are asking about, the latest stock price or something like that. That's not what this call is about.
Yeah.
First of all, do you experience have you experienced any of that when you like put this into production? Was there anything that surprised you with how people were using the agent?
Mm, I would say so. Like a conversation like is non-deterministic, so it's already like so much different than normal software.
Yeah.
I would say how we monitor. We actually use a platform called Sakura. They're great for both like testing and monitoring, and that's really
Amazing.
allowed us to be able to say like, okay, like how do we simulate as many different scenarios with the agent before it goes live? Because in healthcare, like yeah, it's pretty easy to be like, all right, it's not going to be a catastrophe outcome, but you don't even want like a slightly bad outcome. You have to be super conservative. So what we do is just like have 10, 20, 100 use cases that we test our voice agents against, make sure that can handle all of them. And then when it goes into production, we're just kind of watching for like just negative sentiment, anything like that. Um, Making sure the agent is speaking like generally appropriately. Like that, a lot of the agents, if you give them a goal, will be like a little too adherent trying to find that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so we make sure that the agent's able to like have a little bit more tact in the conversation as well.
Nice. That's great. What did you say the tool is called? Sakura?
Yeah, Sakura. It's
Cool.
Cekura. I
Awesome.
believe. Yeah.
And when you're actually like monitoring in production, what does that look like? Is that like you're listening to the recordings yourself or reading through transcripts of the recordings, or do you have some sort of like analysis you perform on it? What would you recommend as best practice for like keeping track of making sure your agents are on track?
Yeah, so it's an analysis on the transcript is like the top end, and then like anything that's flagged, we're listening to the recording. And
Nice.
obviously, as we roll out new use cases, like we're listening to every single one. But eventually, like we just have some level of like metrics to be like, okay, this one needs some attention.
Awesome. What's next for the company and the product? What are you building towards? Anything you want to shout out? And I'm going to put your website up on the screen so folks can check it out themselves.
Let's see. Yeah, what's next? You know, I think right now we're living in a world where there's quite a bit of like horizontal healthcare voice agents. And I think like our website copy kind of like reflects a similar thing. It's like, oh, okay, here's our use case, we can customize, etc. But ultimately, like what I see is like using a voice agent as a tool towards like one very specific or like 1 to 3 very specific use cases to be like, okay, we own this process end to end. We know you have this problem. We have the playbook to solve it. A voice agent is going to be part of that.
Mm,
But ultimately, like there's a sort out there, Hello Patient, like Super Dial, like all these folks that are like going in and trying to just like piecemeal forward deploy everything, which I don't necessarily think is going to be like a way you make a really durable, loved product, right? You just want to have like something that solves a problem incredibly well end to end, and a customer can just come in, not have to think about it.
amazing. So the website's flowlinehealth.com. Who should reach out, Gabe? Who are the right folks that can use Flowline, and how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, if you're a healthcare professional that's either fielding or making a ton of calls, reach out to me at either gabe@flowlinehealth.com, or you can hit the box here with your email. I'll reach out myself, and happy to do a demo or talk about how we can help.
Amazing. Well, thanks for the time. Thanks for sharing details about the challenges of building voice agents and some of those tips and tricks. Everything from pacing to whether you should use an agent builder or build from scratch yourself. I'm looking forward to continuing to follow along with Flowline and hoping folks check it out if they're experiencing this pain themselves.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you so much, Tyler.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for coming on, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yes, sir. All right, cheers.
Bye now.